Jayden Higgins could have the easiest fit into an NFL offense in this class. He has great size to play from the outside, he has fluid movement abilities to run routes from the inside, he has great size to be able to win jump balls, and he has fantastic hands to win in the middle and intermediate parts of the field. With all that, there is a fair argument for Higgins to have the highest floor of any of the receivers in this whole class. Hey y'all! For this video, we'll be continuing going through the 2025 wide receiver prospects and have another star-studded part covering Jalen Royals from Utah State, Jayden Higgins from Iowa State, Jaylin Lane from Virginia Tech, Jaylin Noel from Iowa State, and Jimmy Horn Jr. from Colorado. If you're new to these, my wide receiver evals use a lot of different grading methods, which if you want more details on these, you can check out part 1 of the series, which should be accessible with the link that should be on the screen now, as I have more details on how I do my grading in that. Also, if you want to check out my grades and evals of receivers from last year for reference, you can check them out with the link that should be in the description. For any new viewers, I have evals and full scouting reports out for players like Emeka Egbuka, Elikayo Manor, Isaiah Bond, Jack Besh, and more if you want to check them out on my channel as well. I'll be continuing going through my top 50 wide receivers in this draft, so be sure you don't miss any of the other parts of the wide receiver series or any other positional group series in the future. Be sure to subscribe. Now let's take a look at Royals. Starting with a look at the Royals' basic stats. Due to a foot injury, he only played in 7 games in 2024. So it's pretty impressive that he's still able to earn 81 targets and put up 55 receptions, 834 yards, and 6 touchdowns in those few games. What wasn't as impressive was having 3 drops in those 7 games for a drop rate of 5.2%. After playing nearly every snap from the outside last year, Royals showed more versatility this year, playing nearly a quarter of his snaps from the slot. Looking at his highlight games, with Royals playing in the Mountain West, he didn't face tough competition very often, which does make his evaluation a bit tougher. Regardless, I ended up highlighting his UNLV, Boise State, and Utah games. He was incredible against UNLV and Boise State, getting at least 14 targets, 9 receptions, and 155 yards, and a touchdown in both games. Unfortunately, this toughest matchup outside the Mountain West against Utah, he had a pretty underwhelming game, finishing with just 4 receptions for 44 yards. With small school prospects, there's often gray area that comes in their evaluation due to the level of competition they faced. For Royals, that issue is definitely present, and his lack of production in his matchups outside the Mountain West against Utah and USC in 2024 and Iowa in 2023 does admittedly make me nervous. However, I've been a fan of Royals for some time, so let's take a look at how his grades ended up. For his hands, jump ball, contested catch, body control, and ball tracking, his ball skills jump out consistently as he catches the ball with good hand technique and focus. He also does a good job working back to the quarterback to ensure he can secure the catch. He has such tough hands to be able to finish catches through contact, which showed with a 53.3% success rate in those situations in 2024. He just has a great "that ball is mine" mentality, and is never going to be afraid to go attack a ball. His timing on his attacks and being able to raise his hands through contact also gives him some good upside and ability to play bigger than his size. He also brings some great timing to his attacks and is capable of making some impressive last-minute adjustments to off-target throws. He can make those adjustments thanks to his great ball tracking skills, which helped him finish catches over his shoulders and on deep passes down the field. I honestly don't have too many negatives here, but I do think it's worth noting that his success in contested catch rates did regress in 2024 compared to 2023, when he finished at 73.9%. It's hard to know if he's closer to the 70-plus player in 2023 or the 50% player in 2024, since we really got a year and a half of him on film. So he doesn't have that proven track record to show what he's capable of, and especially compared to the other receivers who have 3 to 4 years of experience to prove their talent. So with a lot of good, he ended up with an A- for his hands, B for his jump ball contested catch, and another A- for his body control and ball tracking. Going to his route running and release, he shows some really good fundamentals as a route runner. He has a good understanding of how to establish leverage very quickly. It can also get his defender's hips turned around to be able to get an easier win. Also, he's very good against zone coverage and has a great eye of finding and settling into openings in the defense. Those technical aspects and his fluid movement skills as a route runner help create consistent separation against albeit lesser competition. His release may be questionable at the next level, but he has a really great starter kit. He has really good foot speed and quickness that he can throw at corners with different timing to create early separation at the start of his route. Now, while he can be a really good route runner, his route tree was noticeably more limited in 2024, with a lot more screens, slant, and go patterns. His 2023 film showed the ability to handle a more diverse route tree, but he needs to prove he can handle it in the NFL. Also, he can sometimes skip breaking down his cuts, and sometimes just ends up rounding them instead of making them more crisp. Other times he can be a bit slow in his cuts, which gives the defenders time to catch up and get back in coverage. Part of why I think his cuts can be a little bit slow is sometimes he doesn't always have the great explosiveness to guarantee separation in the NFL on his cuts. With him choosing to skip jumps at the combine, I kind of have a feeling this might be the case and he might know it. Also, I like to see him use a bit more tempo in his routes, as he can often just operate at one speed, which can make it a bit easier to cover. His release, while solid, also needs improvements to be ready for the NFL. He has some good foot moves, but he doesn't use his arms enough, which can lead to extra contact in his release. That led to him having more struggles against physical coverage and press. Utah and Iowa love to run physical press coverage, so go figure why he struggled against them. Regardless, I think if he continues to take on unnecessary contact, I fear he will have more trouble separating in the NFL, especially as he may lack a great burst in his cuts. So Royals still earned enough to be able to earn a B for his route running, but earned just a C+ for his release. For his yards after catch potential, future role, and athleticism or RAS, he has great acceleration and speed to be very good after the catch. He also shows some really impressive vision in open field to be able to find the best path to take after the catch and did a good job following his blocks. The level of competition he faced helped him survive tackles, but he also showed good ability to stay on his feet. He runs with good pad level and has good balance, which can be rare for a receiver, and has some good jukes that he can pull off to avoid contact. Those movement skills as well as his good transition after the catch make him a great weapon on screen and short passing plays. Also, while he needs work as a blocker, the effort is there, which is a good starting point for NFL coaches. That being said, to help earn playing time, he will need to improve his blocking technique. As I mentioned, the effort is definitely there, but he blocks with just really poor technique as he's too upright in his stance, has poor leverage, and does a lot of head ducking. He also can be more creative after the catch and have better timing with his moves in open space. And other times he was a bit delayed in making his move, which didn't matter as much against lesser competitions. However, that delay likely won't work against better tacklers in the NFL who could take him down earlier and limit those gains. Also, I'd like to see him have a bit more patience with his blocks. Sometimes he can rush things a little bit too much instead of letting his blocks get set, which sometimes stops him from having an even bigger gain. Also, while he'll likely be the highest person on Royals out there, I understand that the question of how he will perform against better competition is the biggest question for his outlook and requires hopeful projection. His games against quality defenses like Utah and USC in 2024 and Iowa in 2023 were known to be less productive than the rest of his games. The lower production against better competition is expected, but that is definitely still a red flag if he's just only beating on lesser opponents for the rest of his games. I know he reportedly had a good Senior Bowl week, but he just had to perform well for a single week, whereas he will need to perform well over the course of a full season to remain a regular part of an NFL offense. So Royals earned a B on his yards after catch potential and future role, but earned a great A- for his athleticism or RAS. As summary of his strengths, he plays with really great hands and can make some really impressive body adjustments to throws which can bail out the quarterback and make him seem bigger than he is. Also, while his route tree did take a step back in 2024, he still showed the ability to run quality routes and showed some promising ability to be able to help him beat quality press as well. Finally, he is a very athletic player who runs with good vision and can make defenders miss to help him be capable of picking up extra yards over expected on his catches. As I mentioned though, his route tree did go in the wrong direction in 2024, so I want to see it get back on track in the NFL. I also want to see if he can consistently separate against NFL caliber corners by consistently breaking down his cuts and using his hands more to prove he isn't just winning with his athleticism against lesser competition. Finally, while the effort is there in his blocking, he needs a technique to follow as well. Hopefully getting that help from NFL coaches can help clean up those deficiencies though, and he can be a more effective blocker. So by taking the average of all his grades, Jalen Royals earned a 3.17 out of 4, which puts him in my good starter tier. Having Royals this high likely won't age very well in the future, but gosh dang it, these are my rankings and my grades, so I'm going to stick to them, no matter how dumb they could make me look in the future. But I just can't help but see a future NFL starter in Royals. He has the athleticism, the build, ball skills, and fundamentals in a route running and release to be good to very good receiver in the NFL. From what I've seen, it seems like people are also having trouble finding deficits in this game, which is usually a good sign that people see the talent, but are just cautious about having a player at a smaller school so high. Now, he isn't without risk since he needs to prove he can take the next step in the NFL and isn't this year's Sky Moore. However, as someone who wasn't a Sky Moore fan back in his draft class, but has been a Royals fan this entire time, he just feels different. As for a comp, just as my grades for Royals are lofty, my comp is also lofty with a comp to a different Moore in DJ Moore. Both Moore and Royals have good athleticism and are very effective players after the catch. Both also have tough hands and are able to attack balls despite their average size. Both also show good fundamentals as route runners and in their release to have the potential to be better players with more coaching. That being said, that success is dependent on them taking the next step and proving they can handle more expensive route tree. Also, neither have great bursts in their cuts, which makes it a bit more important for them to be able to improve their release to ensure they can get consistent separation in the NFL. I know a comp to Moore is likely a reach, but I just keep saying Maryland DJ Moore whenever I watch Royals, and since I made that connection, I just can't shake it from my head. I don't think he'll go in the first round like Moore did, but I do think Royals could really surprise people and one day be a top receiver for a team if he makes the right adjustments. Going to our next receiver, and a big name as well as just a big body receiver, Jayden Higgins from Iowa State. Taking a look at his basic stats, they're great. He earned a whopping 129 targets, which he turned into 87 receptions, 1,183 yards, and 9 touchdowns. Despite that high target volume, he only had 2 drops in 2024 for a drop rate with 2.2%. which to put in perspective how good his hands are, he only had 4 drops in the past 3 seasons on 295 targets for a drop rate of just 1.02%, which for those who aren't familiar with standard drop rates, that is incredible. Also, despite the big frame of 6'4", 214 pounds, he actually played a fair amount from both the inside and outside, with nearly a third of his snaps coming from the slot in 2024. So that alone already adds a lot of versatility to his game. Looking at his highlight games against Arizona State, Kansas State, and Iowa, he had a great game against Arizona State with 7 receptions for 115 yards, and decent to solid games against Kansas State and Iowa. His Kansas State game was the least impressive of the highlight games with just 3 receptions for 53 yards, but the crazy thing is that Kansas State game was actually the lowest amount of receptions and receiving yards he had in a single game in 2024. So a lot of receivers probably would be content with a stat line like that. However, Higgins was probably beating himself up for having the worst statistical game of his season. For the rest of his games, he had over 5 receptions in 10 of his 13 games and more than 75 yards on 8 of his 13 games. Those are pretty ridiculous numbers and just shows the incredible consistency Higgins is capable of. But to see if that consistency led to good grades, let's take a look at some of his grades. For his hands, jump ball, contested catch, body control, and ball tracking, he makes the most of his size, being able to soar and make catches at the very end of his frame to make off-target throws look easy completions thanks to his ability to adjust the balls. He has such great timing and fluid movements to attack balls that it makes it very difficult for defenders to defend the entirety of his huge catch radius. That makes him a very dangerous jump ball winner, especially since he has the strength to be able to jump through contact and make a play on the ball. To make things even better, he has such great late hands that it makes it even harder to stop in the red zone. He's also very successful throughout his career at converting on contested catches and converted 58.3% of his opportunities in 2024 and 55.6% in his entire career. He just does such a great job using his long arms to get his hands on the ball first and then uses his strong hands to secure the catch. He also does a great job following the ball down the field to routinely finish catches over his shoulders. Now, while he is a very good jump ball winner, he can be even better by doing a better job boxing out defenders as well. Also, he can sometimes attack the ball with suboptimal hand technique, which he'll have to clean up to stay successful in these situations in the NFL. So Higgins had a fantastic start with A-minuses in his hands, jump ball, contested catch, and body control and ball tracking. For his route running and release, he's a very fluid athlete for his size and has good foot speed to make cleaner cuts than you'd expect. He is also able to make snappy cuts and has good use of head fakes and jab steps to create deception. He also has nice movement skills to get consistent separation on hitch routes by selling his vertical, then shifting to use efficient footwork to work back to the quarterback. In general, on the rest of his routes, he also just does a good job working back to the quarterback to make him an easier target. He also knows how to make himself an easier target against zone coverage, as he had a good eye for finding openings and knew when to settle into open space. Though he ran a limited route tree at Ohio State, he reportedly was very successful in the majority of his routes at the Senior Bowl, which suggests that he could be capable of handling a more diverse route tree. Now, having that route tree ability is nice, but having that at 6'4" makes him a very unique weapon. That being said, though he did run a more expansive route tree at the Senior Bowl, he ran a route tree that was primarily slants, shallow drags, hitches, and vertical routes at Iowa State. Now, he ran most of those routes well, but being that specialized and not branching out to a full tree does make it a bit risky to trust him to be able to win consistently in the NFL, despite how he performed at the Senior Bowl. Also, as I mentioned, he ran most of those routes well, but I would have to say most and not all due to him having trouble winning with his vertical routes. In general, his separation down the field was pretty inconsistent as he can struggle to clear and stack defenders. For his more shallow routes, there were a number of times when he would sometimes rush his process and be too upright in his break, leading to more rounded cuts. Also, his release does really scare me in NFL. He has these long arms, but he just doesn't use them very well, leading to defenders being in his hip pocket at the start of the route. His hands are also just too slow and his counters are too weak to effectively disengage from press and physical coverage. While he does have good foot speed for his size, he doesn't have quick enough feet to cleanly get past defenders. Also, he can struggle to have good timing with his upper and lower body in his release, which can also put him in a jam. So Higgins slows down a bit with a B for his route running and crashes even further with a D+ for his release. For his yards after catch potential, future role, and athleticism or RAS, he has solid effort and a very good frame to help as a blocker. Also, despite his size, Higgins has good leverage to help sustain his block. Unfortunately, despite the great 9.62 RAS score, he doesn't offer very much in the yards after catch scenarios and doesn't have very much wiggle to make defenders miss. He also sometimes has a slight hitch in his transition from receiver to runner, which further limits his ability to get yards after the catch. As for how he fits in the NFL, if he is able to get consistent separation in the NFL, Jayden Higgins could have the easiest fit into an NFL offense in this class. He has great size to play from the outside, he has fluid movement abilities to run routes from the inside, he has great size to be able to win jump balls, and he has fantastic hands to win in the middle and intermediate parts of the field. With all that, there is a fair argument for Higgins to have the highest floor of any of the receivers in this whole class. But as I said, him getting consistent separation will be the biggest thing since he just doesn't quite look as athletic as his RAS score indicates. If he struggles to separate and also continues to struggle against press, he likely will be blanketed by coverage a lot more in the NFL and be a lot less of a consistent contributor as he was in college. So Higgins' stumble continues with a C for his yards after catch potential, but picks up with a B for his future role and an A for his athleticism or RAS. As a summary of his strengths, he has a special blend of size and fluidity that you can't find in every draft. That blend, as well as impressive route running skills at his size, give him the ability to win both from the outside and the inside. What also helped him win was his ball skills and his jump ball ability. He has a huge catch radius which has let him get his hands on nearly any ball in his direction, and then he had the great hand skills to be able to finish most catches. Now, while his route running really impressed me, I will admit that he ran a pretty limited route tree in college. As I mentioned before, he showed good success running different routes at the Senior Bowl, but I want to see him do this over the course of a longer period to feel more confident in his route running. Also want to see him clean up some of the sloppy cuts that he made to win more consistently. I'd also like to see him win against press coverage more consistently to help him get better separation, especially downfield. Finally, I'm not sure if he'll be able to improve it, but his ability to get yards after the catch is really disappointing and caps his big play potential. So by taking the average of all his grades, Jayden Higgins earned a 3.08 out of 4, which puts him in my good starter tier. Higgins is such an interesting prospect since he has such rare ability to be able to play from the slot and outside and has proved it in college. He has really impressive ball skills, hands, and good route running upside to be able to seem like he can be a do-it-all receiver. The parallel that does make me a little bit nervous is another Iowa receiver from a few years ago that I liked for similar reasons, Xavier Hutchinson. Hutchinson had a lot of the same traits but ended up going the 6th round of the draft and has struggled to carve out a role with the Houston Texans despite the injuries they dealt with in 2024. I do have concerns that I'm falling back into my tendencies of falling for a tall, lean receiver like Higgins, but Higgins just feels like a more fluid and more confident route runner than Hutchinson was. Also, the strong impression he made at Senior Bowl makes me hopeful that his outcome will likely be different than Hutchinson's. So instead of comping him to Hutchinson, I instead have a Corey Davis as Jayden Higgins comp. Both have a big catch radius and great hands to make them easy targets for quarterbacks. Also, both are more fluid than you'd expect for bigger players, which allows them to be more versatile route runners. However, neither are great separators and sometimes need to rely on their ball skills to win. Also, neither have great ability to create after the catch, which can limit their upside. Davis's high draft capital and poor results after signing with the Jets have made him come off as a bit of a disappointment. However, with Higgins likely going on day 2, I think he'll get more time to be able to be eased into an offense and improve his release. Once he cleans up his release, he could be producing as Corey Davis did at the end of his rookie deal. Moving to our next receiver, Jaylin Lane from Virginia Tech. If you watch part 2, which included his teammate Taquan Felton, I mentioned that Virginia Tech didn't have the best passing game, which also shows in Lane stats with just 58 targets that went for 38 receptions, 466 yards, and 2 touchdowns. Also, he did have a fair amount of drops in those few targets as he had 3 drops which equal out to a drop rate of 7.3%. He continued to play the majority of snaps from the slot since transferring from Middle Tennessee in 2023, with 84.5% of his snaps coming from the slot in 2024. Looking at his highlight games against Clemson, Georgia Tech, and Miami, they were pretty rough. He failed to get more than 50 yards in any of them and only got more than 12 yards in his Miami game. Now, he did have some solid games across the rest of the season, but struggled to be a consistent playmaker with just 5 out of his 12 games with more than 3 receptions and 6 with more than 30 receiving yards. Those aren't very high bars, so it is pretty disappointing to see him fail to meet those so often in 2024. But to see if he failed to meet those due to the poor quarterback play or due to possible talent limitations, let's take a look at some of his grades. For his hands, jump ball, contested catch, body control, and ball tracking, he has respectable catch radius for his size. He can make some really good adjustments to throws and can even snatch balls up before they hit the ground. He has good hand technique and typically will catch the ball away from his body as well. That being said, he did show struggles against physical play with limited success in contested catch situations with 16.7% success rate in 2024 and just a 36.7% success rate for his career. Also, as I mentioned with his stats, he has failed to handle regular high volume at this level of competition, which does make me worried his hands could falter even further with the jump to the NFL. So Lane ended up earning a solid B for his hands, but a poor D plus for his jump ball and contested catch ability. However, he did rebound with a B plus for his body control and ball tracking. For his route running and release, I'll be honest, I don't have a lot of positives to bring up here. He unfortunately is a pretty raw route runner who ran a somewhat limited route tree. His cuts are often slow developing, and while he will try to use some moves like stutter steps to get defenders to bite on fakes, they're often ineffective and just eat up extra time the quarterback had to wait for him in his route. His cuts also lack explosiveness, which causes limitations in the ability to separate despite his great athleticism. Also, his poor ability to use tempo in his routes made it easier for defenders to cover him. He also can make things easier for defenders to cover him as he struggles to establish leverage and has trouble finding openings against zone coverage. Also, he can really struggle against physical coverage and will often let defenders alter his route path. His poor release and limited release package also invited more contact, which made this issue even worse. He often just relies on athleticism to run past defenders in his release and doesn't use his hands to effectively fight off coverage. So things got very ugly for Lane with a D- for route running, which is the lowest of all the receivers in this class, and a D+ for his release. For his yards after catch potential, future role, and athleticism or RAS, his athleticism stood out to me and also got some attention at the combine. He has fantastic straight line speed and really great acceleration which shows in open space. When making catches, he has a fluid transition upfield, even when he has to make tough adjustments to the ball. He also does a good job hugging his blocks and has good contact balance and pad level to rush through tackle attempts by pursuing defenders. With those traits and his experience as a returner, I could see him becoming a very good returner with the current NFL kickoff format. His experience as a returner shows versatility on special teams, and experience all over the formation shows versatility on offense. He has a lot of experience on the line as a standard outside receiver, in the slot, and while going in motion. That versatility could help him carve out a unique role for a team. He might also even be able to carve out a role as a vertical threat thanks to his speed and acceleration, giving him a chance to break past defenders. However, after the catch, he just often relies on athleticism in space as he can be uncreative and just tries to outrun defenders. Finally, though he does give good efforts in his blocks, it doesn't translate to good results. He does a lot of lunging and head ducking, leading to whiffs on his attempts. When he does get his hands on the defender, he comes at them with poor leverage and punch, which lets them slide off his block too easily. As for how he fits in the NFL roster, I do think he is capable of handling a few different roles and could have some special team value. The question is how much he can truly contribute on offense though. So Lane earned a very good B for his yards after catch potential, a solid C+ for his future role, and an A for his athleticism to salvage his grades. As for a summary of his strengths, despite his smaller frame, he can make some nice adjustments to off-target throws, which he regularly had to do in 2024 and 2023. Also, he has some really good tools and experience that could help him secure a returner role with a team and get a roster spot. He has great contact balance and quickness and speed to get yards on returns and after the catch. Finally, he was used in a lot of different ways, which shows he's a smart player and can handle a lot of different duties, which could impress the team and get him some playing time if they have a special role or idea they need a player for. However, as just a standard receiver, his route running is really underwhelming and really far behind. Also, despite the great athleticism, he lacks great burst in his cuts, which contributes to some of his inconsistencies earning separation. What also led to those issues were his trouble dealing with physical coverage, they had trouble disengaging and getting open against handsy corners. Finally, he has played the majority of his snaps from the slot at Virginia Tech, and I suspect that will likely continue in the NFL due to his limited release package. So by taking the average of all his grades, Lane earned a 2.42 out of 4, which puts him in my needs improvement to contribute tier. Lane's flash and versatility are interesting, but I think he's just more of an interesting player and less of a productive player. I think he can be used in a lot of different ways, but I don't think I would use the quote-unquote chess piece label for him, since that often implies he can be great in those roles. Lane kind of just handles those roles, but not provide much over expected. As for a comp, I have Sky Moore as Lane's comp. Both have good athleticism and good contact balance for their size. Also, both can handle a lot of different roles, including as a returner to make them more interesting. However, neither are great in those specific roles, which can make it questionable if it's even worth having them out there in those specific situations. Also, neither can garner consistent separation due to lack of explosiveness in their cuts, and can be bothered by physical coverage. More frustrated Chiefs fans since he was playing a good number of snaps and used in a lot of different roles, but failed to do much in those opportunities. I'm not certain Lane will end up getting similar playing time, but I think the results will likely be mostly the same. I think the silver lining for Lane is the new kickoff format, as he might be able to earn a roster spot as a special teams player. Moving to our next receiver, and who has become a lot more of an interesting name since the combine, Jaylin Noel from Iowa State. Similar to his teammate Jayden Higgins, Noel had a very productive 2024 season, setting career highs in targets, receptions, yards, and touchdowns with 119 targets, 8 receptions, 1,194 yards, and 8 touchdowns. Maybe the best thing of it all is that he nearly set a career low in drops, with just 4 drops for a good drop rate of 4.8%. Also, though he's branded as a slot-only player, he did play slightly over a quarter of his snaps from the outside in 2024. Looking at his highlight games against Arizona State, Kansas State, and Iowa, he was a regular contributor with good games against Arizona State and Iowa, getting at least 5 receptions and 60 yards and a touchdown in both games. Like Higgins, Noel had one of his worst games of the season against Kansas State, but at least managed to get 6 receptions in that game. Looking at the rest of his games, he wasn't quite as consistent as Higgins, but did have more than 5 receptions in 6 of his 14, and more than 60 yards in 8 of his 14 games. Though, to be fair, one of those games was against a bad Miami defense that he got to play against while Higgins sat out. But regardless, to see how he compares to his teammate Higgins, let's take a look at his grades. For his hands, jump ball, contested catch, body control, and ball tracking, he's able to show off his ball tracking skills this year with a number of catches over his shoulders. Also, he shows some good adjustments and attacks, and even can make plays on balls if they're underthrown. What I have been a critic of it in the past was his hands, since he would often have lapses leading to some unnecessary drops, and while he wasn't perfect, he did look more confident making catches and more consistently catching the ball away from his body. The toughness of his hands was never a question, with him having another year of converting at least 50% of his contested catch opportunities by converting on 52% of his chances in 2024. A lot of small receivers can sometimes struggle in those situations, but Noel does a great job getting his hands on the ball early and then quickly securing the pass. However, I did notice a number of times when he did have unnecessary hops that made it seem like he was likely having lapses in his ball tracking. He can also be a little bit stiff at times, making adjustments to balls that were thrown a little bit off his frame. So Noel has a solid start with a B+ for his hands, a B for his jump ball and contested catch, and B- for his body control and ball tracking. For his route running and release, he's a full package as a route runner. He runs great routes that have great deception, using head fakes, tempo, and stump fakes to get open. He also has very clean footwork in his routes, and cuts to be able to make some really clean, crisp cuts at times. He can do this thanks to using good hip sync to break down his cuts. He'll show some really nice awareness of how to work to get his defender off balance and then attack their blindside on short to intermediate patterns. He also shows a great eye for finding the blind spot of the defense by routinely finding openings against zone coverage. That'll culminate in him generating consistent separation on shorter and medium patterns to help be a good safety valve and keep the offense on track. While his short and intermediate routes have been great, I have previously been a critic of his success pass statistics, as his A-dot career high was 7.7 prior to this season. However, this season he smashed that career high and nearly doubled it by finishing with an A-dot of 12.2. His quickness from his athletic testing also shows in his release, with the twitchy release that helps him get his defenders to open their hips while they're in press to get an early advantage. That being said, while his release has decent potential thanks to his foot speed, I do think he's likely better suited to stay in the slot in the NFL. He has a small frame with a small wingspan that makes it really difficult to win in his release with just his feet. As I mentioned, he would try to win with just his feet, but would often have trouble when he faced longer arm defenders who could get their hands on him and were more physical in their coverage. At that point, defenders were usually just able to keep up in their coverage, or at the very least force him off his route and mess up his timing with the play. Now, that didn't pop up too much in film, since he benefited from a lot of free releases in college, and NFL teams could also hide him from press if they want to by using him in the slot. However, that just makes him a bit more limited than people want to suggest after seeing his combine performance. So Noel earns a very good B for his route running, but a disappointing C- for his release. For his yards after catch potential, future role in athleticism or RAS, after having a lack of great athleticism be a regular criticism of him by a number of analysts including myself, he made us all look stupid by having one of the best combine performances of the weekend, finishing with a RAS of 9.72. So that great athleticism gives him more opportunity to do more in the yards after the catch situations. He has already showed he can use his blocks and run with quality vision, so he might be able to take a step forward in this area in the NFL. Now, his combine testing caught a lot of people by surprise, since he didn't perform like one of the best athletes on the field after the catch. He has very little wiggle and creativity in open space, which makes it rare for him to make a defender miss. He also has poor contact balance given his frame and will likely go down at first contact. So he isn't able to make defenders miss with his quickness or strength, which also often leads to him getting the minimum, which is really disappointing based on his testing. What also causes some issues is he can sometimes take a little bit to gather himself after making the catch to turn upfield, which further delays his process. Also, while he is a willing blocker, he has a very weak anchor and will likely be a liability as a blocker in the NFL. As for how he'll fit in the NFL, I think he has a pretty natural fit as a slot receiver. Some may be more optimistic that he can make it on the outside, but I think his skills are best suited from the slot and will help him mask some of his issues. That may be limiting, since it can limit how many teams will actually want him or even need a slot receiver, but he is one of the better, more pro-ready options from the slot this class. So despite the great athletic testing, Noel earned just a C+ for his yards after catch potential, but he did earn at least a B- for his future role, which is good for a slot-only player. Also, thanks to that great combine and RAS score, he earned an A for his athleticism or RAS. As a summary of his strengths, it was fantastic to see his A-dot increase so drastically to double digits after being stuck around 6 and 7 for the past few seasons. Also, it was good to see his hands take another step forward with less drops and still finishing catches through contact. Also, he's such a smooth route runner who brings a lot of great nuance and deception to his routes while having the ability to make clean cuts, which could help him earn snaps in week 1. That being said, while he can make clean cuts, he sometimes can also rush things a bit and just round his cuts. He'll need to make cleaner cuts more consistently to get separation, especially if he continues to struggle against physical coverage. Handsy defenders often gave him issues and especially gave him trouble getting separation downfield despite his improved A-dot. Also, maybe it was due to his lack of experience making catches downfield in previous seasons, but he did have some lapses in his ball tracking that could be more problematic in the NFL if those don't improve. Finally, despite the amazing combine performance, it doesn't show on the field as he has pretty limited success after the catch and often just gets the expected. So, for taking the average of all his grades, Noel earned a 2.83 out of 4, which puts him in my good role player tier. While Noel has been one of the biggest risers since the combine, with some mocks even putting him in the first round, I'd be surprised if he goes that early in the draft. He feels like a classic day 2 player, as he's likely more limited in his role and potential impact in the NFL. While I do think he's a quality player, I worry that his lack of ability to create after the catch and his smaller frame forcing him to be a slot player will be too much for him to overcome it to be more than a role player. Which is still very helpful, but it isn't quite aligned with how high other people have him put right now. As for a comp, I have another good role player in Jamison Crowder as his comp. Both are slot specialists in quality route running and good deception in their routes. Also both have tough hands to ensure they are finishing catches over the middle. Both also could contribute a little bit down the field to add a bit more versatility. However, neither could uncover themselves consistently to be more regular forces down the field. Also both have smaller catch radii and are a bit stiff in their adjustments, which could limit their impact. Both also struggled with focus drops and offered little after the catch. Crowder wasn't the most exciting player, but he has enjoyed a long, productive NFL career. I think Noel could do the same if he goes to the right team with the right expectations of him. Moving to our last receiver of this group, Jimmy Horn Jr. from Colorado. Horn did have the most productive year due to missing some games and playing in just 9 games in 2024. In the games he was able to play the majority of, he earned 53 targets for 37 receptions, 441 yards, and a touchdown. He did also have a fair number of drops given the smaller target total, with 2 for a drop rate of 5.1%. Also, he played almost every single snap from the slot and often went full games without a single snap from the outside. Looking at his highlight games against BYU, Kansas State, and Nebraska, yikes. He often was able to get a decent number of receptions with 3 receptions in all the highlighted games, but only had more than 20 yards in just the Nebraska game. His BYU game was probably the most bleak out of them, with just 7 yards on 4 receptions. His season totals also weren't very impressive and honestly more concerning if anything, with nearly half his receiving yards coming against North Dakota State. So that meant Horn averaged just 35 yards per game against FBS schools this year. I know he had Travis Hunter to compete with and a few other receivers for targets, but he still should have been able to manage more than that with how often Colorado threw the ball. So to see what went wrong, let's take a look at some of his grades. For his hands, jump ball, contested catch, body control, and ball tracking, he caught the ball with good hand technique and arm extension. Despite his small frame, he does what he can to try to expand his catch radius and make catches at the end of it. He is good at both going down low for passes as well as riding up to snatch the ball. He can also make some well-timed body adjustments and also finish catches over his shoulders to help him on passes down the field. Though his hands did improve this year, he can still have some focus drops that he needs to clean up. Also, his frame limited his impact in being able to finish contested catch situations, as he had trouble finishing these situations with a success rate of just 33.3% for 2024 and 25.9% for his career. Good slot receivers need to be able to convert in those situations, so that'll be a major barrier to him getting playing time. So Horn earned a solid B for his hands, but a very poor C- for his jump ball and contested catch. However, he did rebound with a good B+ for his body control and ball tracking. For his route running and release, he can make some shortcuts at times and has a very good eye for openings in the defense. He even showed a good understanding of how to read the layers of its own defense to be able to work in those areas in the intermediate areas of the field. However, he is pretty disappointing from a route versatility standpoint. The majority of his routes were shorter patterns near the line of scrimmage, which shows with his 7.8 ADOT for the year. Even those short routes, he lacked explosiveness in his cuts and was often redirected by physical coverage, which limited how often he could get separation. The progression they had also could be a bit suspicious, as he benefited from a good chunk of his yards coming after doing a short drag or an out route when he was just left alone guaranteed to get at least a 5-yard gain. Also, corners were typically able to stonewall him and push him away off his route, even to the point where he would sometimes end up out of bounds. His feet just also weren't quick enough and his arm counters weren't strong enough to be able to help him win consistently on the outside. So Horn earned just a C+ for his route running, and a poor D- for his release, which was the lowest of any receiver in this class scored for their release. For his yards after catch potential, future role and athleticism or RAS, he can be harder to bring down than expected thanks to keeping his legs moving through contact. Also, he can be shifty and pair that with good acceleration to make defenders miss and pick up extra yards. He also shows good vision to follow his blocks, which showed after the catch and on returns. He also showed good traits as a route runner to fit into his slot role. The problem is that he'll likely only be able to play from the slot due to his small frame and lack of release skills. Also, his route tree is just way too limited to feel confident in him providing much impact past the sticks. So you might be thinking, well, at least a team can use him as a slot receiver underneath, right? However, with his poor athleticism and a number of slot receivers available in the draft, you can do a lot of the same things but do it better than him. It makes the question why they wouldn't just want to target them instead of him. So Horn earned a solid B- for his yards after catch potential, but a poor D+ for his future role and D for his athleticism or RAS. For a summary of his strengths, he catches the ball with good hand technique and can extend his arms to have a larger catch radius than you'd expect for a player his size. Also shows a good eye for openings in the defense to help him win from the slot. He also showed good acceleration, shiftiness, vision, and balance to get extra yards after the catch and contribute on kick returns. That being said, he just looks like a player who's only capable of playing from the slot due to his small frame, which will be very limiting. Also, while he has a good eye for zone to help him be a good slot receiver, he also needs to improve his ability to finish catches through contact to help raise his floor as a slot-only player. He can also struggle with contact when he's on his route as he isn't able to clear press and is too easily misdirected by defenders. Finally, to potentially put the final nail in his coffin for his draft hopes, he lacks great athleticism, which really makes it questionable what he can offer to a team that another player can't offer. So by taking the average of all his grades, Horn earned just a 2 out of 4, which puts him in my unlikely to contribute tier. I just have a hard time seeing Horn work in the NFL. He has such a small frame and really struggles with physicality of bigger defenders. Also, he has a pretty limited route tree, which further complicates what he can offer over other potential options. Maybe he can get a roster spot thanks to his return ability, but a small frame may increase the risk of injury and may make teams want to go in a different direction. As for a comp, I have Justin Hardy as his comp. Both are small but can expand their catch radius by adjusting to off-target throws. Also, both have solid ability to pick up yards after the catch and can contribute as returners. However, both may be limited to just being returners due to limited route trees and struggles dealing with physical coverage. Also, neither are great at finishing contested catches and lack explosiveness in their cuts, which can make it difficult for them to make bigger impacts as receivers. Hardy was a role player who helped keep his role thanks to being reliable enough as a pass catcher and having some special teams value. That special teams value is the important part, and where Horn will likely need to prove himself to be able to earn a roster spot. And that's all for part 5. Let me know what your thoughts are on all the receivers in the comments and who you think I'm too high or too low on. This is just part 5 of 10, so there's still a lot more evals to come out over the next few weeks. So to be sure you don't miss any of them, be sure to subscribe. While you're at it, like the videos, it would help the channel and this series grow thanks to you. If you want just a written form of the evals, you can subscribe to my Substack as I'll have the full written eval for each pillar out at the same time as the video. But thank you all and see you all next time.